Today, prices are rising across the board. That includes American favorites like chicken wings. So what's the problem? Airbnb apparently spending $50 million a year to pay out guests and hosts who had bad experiences. That includes patching up bullet holes in walls. We have the details. And Group of 7 nations hatch a plan to stop China's quest for world domination. We hear from a former Reagan defense staffer on what could be ahead. That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. I'm afraid more bad news on rising prices. Another key inflation indicator is flashing red. The Producer Price Index tracks how much money domestic producers get for their products. It jumped 0.8% in May. That means it's up 6.6% since last May, the largest 12-month increase on record since 2010. Even if you take out things that tend to fluctuate in price, like food and energy, it's still a 5.3% spike, another record. Economists say it's due to rising demand from the economy reopening and shortages in supply chains. Others say it's because of the extremely loose monetary policy a la central banks and governments. For you, it means you're paying more for just about everything. That includes chicken wings. If you've ordered recently, you've probably noticed they're pretty expensive now. Apparently, there aren't enough chickens to meet demand, and consumers are a little upset. NTD's Phil Zhou investigates.
Guys, we're in a crisis. We're running low on chicken wings. Prices are going up, and chicken farmers are running low on chickens. What are we going to do?
One restaurant in New York says chicken wing suppliers have doubled their prices.
Oh man, I'll be upset. I wouldn't like that.
I can't go without chicken wings, or chicken in general.
The increased prices are hitting some loyal customers hard.
Whoa, I've been eating chicken since I was born.
From $8.99 to, let's say, $12, $11, $13 sometimes.
From like $6 to $8 or $10 to $12 for a meal. It's crazy.
Hudson Valley Chicken says they're down 25% per week in chicken count. That's 10,000 chicks.
Staffing has been hard to get a hold of, certainly more so than ever.
Chicken feed has also gone up 45%.
But I've never seen anything like this before.
Erwin Grom also owns Annie's Rough Cut restaurant. He's decided not to raise menu prices just yet.
You know, we're still paying the bills, and the customers certainly like coming in for chicken wing night.
Grom says he's optimistic that the chicken supply will come back.
I love chicken wings. It's the greatest.
Barbecue and spicy.
You wouldn't have any other choice. Good chicken is hard to find.
I guess chickens have to be rationed, right?
So yummy. I don't know about you, but I got my hands on some fried chicken before prices go up and in case they run out.
Phil Zhou, NTD News, New York.
Demand did cool off on the consumer front in recent weeks, though, with stimulus dollars spent up. Retail sales dropped more than expected in May, down 1.3%. Auto sales dropped, sales at electronics and appliance stores also fell. But consumers are spending more at clothing stores, restaurants, and bars. It looks like Americans are foregoing products and spending the money on travel and other activities instead. And Bloomberg is reporting that Airbnb spends millions a year on stays that go horribly wrong. That includes costs from covering counseling sessions for victims, booking alternative stays, to hiring contractors to cover bullet holes in walls. NTD's Evelyn Lee has more.
Airbnb has a secretive safety team known as Black Box that deals with stays that went horribly wrong. And according to a Bloomberg report, the company is spending around $50 million a year for this purpose. While many of the crimes at Airbnbs could also happen at apartments or hotels, the CEO of Dynamite Travel says hotels are safer.
Hotels have hired security or have security on staff that's constantly rounding to make sure that the guests are all safe.
But if you stay at a private rental property, you're usually there by yourself.
So it's not going to be someone who's present in the home with you. You'll have to extend a call or an email to them if something comes up, or call 911 or first responders.
The safety team at Airbnb is responsible for supporting guests and hosts who had traumatic experiences. According to the report, the team can spend whatever it takes to make victims feel supported. Haynes had her own experience in 2019.
At one point during our stay, someone literally just walked into the home. And it was at night too.
Luckily, she says it was just a previous renter who entered because of a mix-up.
So it was very, very scary. And so that's why I can say firsthand that I've definitely had some safe experiences with Airbnbs and private rentals, but I've also personally had some experiences that definitely were questionable.
Airbnb's head of global operations says as much as they try, occasionally really bad things happen, and it's about how the company responds to make it right. Haynes says although Airbnb should have more consistent and standardized safety precautions in place, it should mostly address enforcement of those rules. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Athletes get massive sponsorship contracts just to wear a brand's clothing or use its equipment when competing. Brands, of course, like being associated with top performers. But apparently Nike's running shoes are so good, even competing brands let their athletes wear them to, quote, level the playing field. NTD's Golden Lee finds out what's afoot.
Nike's running shoes are so powerful, even brand competitors let their athletes wear them in races. Brooks, On, even Reebok allow runners they sponsor to wear Nike's innovative designs.
Bringing more cushioning to a shoe could really help athletes in a way that we never thought of before. It was always previously about reduction and getting lighter, but the product, the Nike Vaporfly that came out of that, added more cushion.
Athletes have smashed world records in under a year, all of them wearing Nike's shoes. Earlier this month, Dutch runner Sifan Hassan beat the women's 10,000-meter record by 10 seconds. Her record was then immediately smashed 2 days later by Ethiopia's Letesembet Gede by 5 seconds. Reebok said in a statement, "While we believe in the performance of our running product, we also acknowledge the recent advances in footwear technology at the elite level," adding that they'll let athletes compete with any footwear that provides an even playing field.
And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the state is easing many of its virus restrictions effective immediately. He says 70% of adults in New York have received at least one dose of the CCP virus vaccine.
So all the state-mandated restrictions are lifted on commercial, social settings, sports and recreation, construction, manufacturing, retail, buildings, all across the board. We can get back to living and businesses can open.
Cuomo says there won't be any limits to social gathering sizes. Businesses will no longer have to follow social distancing rules. Some businesses won't even need to maintain cleaning protocols. Although some rules will remain, New Yorkers for now will continue to have to wear masks in certain places, including schools, subways, large venues, and hospitals. And Morgan Stanley will be happy to hear the news. It wants its bankers back in New York office, or they'll face a pay cut. Its CEO, James Gorman, says inside the office is where people can learn and develop. He also says he'd be very disappointed if people aren't back by Labor Day. And if they want a New York City pay, they have to be physically in New York to get it. Tough boss. Morgan Stanley initially allowed its 70,000 workers to work remotely, but the Daily Mail reports Gorman himself has been coming to the office 4 days a week since last July. That's even though he contracted the virus himself, too. And California is officially reopened from the pandemic. Businesses are happy about it, but a little confused about the mask rules. NTD's Patrick Hayden takes a look.
California is reopening and lockdown restrictions are now mostly lifted. It's being branded as the Great Reopening.
Out of the sun, we'll be having some fun.
At San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, the buses are starting to fill up with tourists.
We're excited and then a little confused. On the 15th, we get to open to full capacity inside, and we've only been able to go 50%, so that would be nice to fill the place up. However, we are still confused about the mask mandate.
He says business was down 70% last year, and only a fraction of the pre-pandemic businesses are still open at the wharf. California, the most populous state, has seen the most deaths, with more than 63,000. But over the last 2 months, death rates have been around the lowest in the country.
We believe that the official reopening of the state will encourage people to travel. We'll be getting not so many international tourists. It'll be more tourists from California.
Fully vaccinated people will no longer be required to wear a mask, including indoors, in most places. Those who are not vaccinated are expected to wear masks, but that won't be enforced. Businesses have three choices: operate on an honour system, require customers to show proof of vaccination, or they can still require everyone to wear a mask. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
The US and EU have agreed to a truce in their long-running trade dispute over subsidies to Airbus and Boeing. The US trade rep said the agreement would suspend a series of tit-for-tat tariffs for 5 years. This 17-year spat was the longest-running and most costly trade dispute in the history of the World Trade Organization. Both sides argue that the other side is providing unfair support to their aerospace company. The WTO then approved tariffs for both sides, which had hit everything from European cheese and wine to US tobacco and spirits. Customs data shows that American importers have paid more than $1.1 billion in tariffs. Now, the U.S. trade chief says the deal allows both sides to focus on the common threat posed by China. China is heavily subsidizing its plane-making industry to develop large passenger jetliners to compete with Airbus and Boeing. And the G7 nations, that's the U.S., Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and Italy, have a plan to counter China's plan for world domination, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. The G7's plan is called Build Back Better World, like President Biden's plan for the U.S. The G7 wants to spend $40 trillion to get ahead of China's shady loans to the developing world, Africa, South America, even sometimes countries like Italy. Its loans have been called debt traps, with the Chinese regime often confiscating key pieces of infrastructure like ports or bridges when the host country can't make repayments. Frank Gaffney served as an Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy under President Reagan. He's now the Vice Chairman at the Committee on Present Danger, China. It's about to release a new report on the BRI, so I asked Gaffney what he's learned.
There are some 140 nations that have either signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative or the Maritime Silk Road or various, spin-offs of this generally, as I say, colonial undertaking by Xi Jinping. Some of them are farther along. Some of them have already begun to try to extricate themselves from it, in fact. But quite a number are still in the process of signing up for what seem on their face to be generous loans. Not a few, I think, greased by corruption, let's be honest. But we're witnessing, as a result of the Belt and Road enterprise, both on the sort of traditional infrastructure side and on the digital counterpart to it, this immense effort using, almost in every case, Chinese labor, Chinese materials, Chinese shipping to build out what will inevitably be dual-use capabilities in strategic places all over the world, getting access to mineral and other resources, getting access to markets, and not least being able to pre-position military capabilities and equipment for the purposes of power projection.
Do you feel this is an undertaking that the U.S. had to bring somewhere like the G7? Is this something that it couldn't have achieved on its own?
I think it will be challenging for any government to do it on its own. We're going to have a very considerable buy-in from the private sector. And I wish that I saw more evidence that the Biden administration understands this. I think no matter how many allied governments sign up to a $40 trillion commitment, especially one larded up with all kinds of Green New Deal nonsense, we're going to have American entrepreneurs and their counterparts in other countries who appreciate that the free world will not survive if this kind of colonial build-out is allowed to continue. It's happening not least in some of the G7 countries themselves, and I think it's fair to say even in ours to some extent.
We see in Italy for sure, but
for sure.
The private sector, is there any evidence that they will come on board? A lot of the stories we've been covering are people trying to appease China, at least not trying to step on their toes for business reasons.
There's a lot of concern on that score, no doubt about it. There was a very important conference, however, I think about 6 weeks or so ago at Liberty University, in which a number of African nations were represented at various levels, either in person or virtually. And Liberty University, under the leadership of the dean of its business school, David Bratt, former congressman, pulled in a number of entrepreneurs, American business leaders, and there did seem to be considerable interests on both sides to see what could be done using a, public-private partnership, I guess you'd say. That ought to be part of the American government's approach to it, it seems to me as well.
Frank Gaffney, Committee on Present Danger China. And on the markets today, stocks eased back below the record highs as investors probably waiting to hear whether the Fed will give any clues about policy changes. The Dow fell 94 points, roughly 0.3%. S&P 500 lost 9 points, 0.2%. The Nasdaq dropped over 100 points, 0.7% today for the Nasdaq. And as we reported yesterday, Elon Musk says Tesla might consider allowing Bitcoin transactions again, but only if miners use cleaner energy. So, NTD's Patrick Hayden took a look at the energy alternatives.
Elon Musk says Tesla may consider using Bitcoin transactions again in the future. That's if cleaner sources of energy are used to mine the crypto. We asked a crypto energy specialist about these concerns and Tesla's recent U-turn.
I don't believe that they thought through this investment as thoroughly as they should have. I mean, as a clean energy company, the environmental, how could they not have thought about the environmental impact of Bitcoin? And
Kraft says people are mostly concerned about coal being used for Bitcoin mining. He says there are better options.
For example, there are natural gas extraction sites that have wasteful emissions of resources. And there are companies right now that are setting up mining rigs to use those to use that energy waste.
He says with China's crypto crackdown, mining is going to flourish elsewhere.
Texas just passed a new law. I think they're an interesting jurisdiction with cheap energy.
And some countries are considering using geothermal energy.
You have El Salvador's president who announced that they'll be building clean energy Bitcoin mining facilities with their volcanoes. Or power from their volcanoes.
He says wherever governments offer subsidies, that's where miners will go. And as well as cleaner energy, he says a more energy efficient way of generating cryptocurrencies will help. It's called proof of stake, and some say for cryptocurrencies like Ether, it will reduce energy consumption by 99%. But he says that shift for Bitcoin is unlikely to ever happen. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And Greece is perhaps the country worst hit by the 2008 global financial crisis. Its banking system collapsed and needed a massive bailout. And so as it recovered from the crisis just 9 years ago in 2012, investors would only lend to Greece if it paid 60% interest every year. And that was for a 5-year bond. 60% a year is a lot, but investors didn't want the risk. 10 years later, investors are now paying Greece to take their money. Their 5-year bond just went negative. It's not because Greece's economy is booming, it's a pandemic. It's because the European Central Bank is buying all of its bonds, so the government can just borrow cheaply. Without all the ECB's support, borrowing rates would rise massively for Greece and other European countries, making it impossible to service their debt. Daniel Akaye helps manage $6 billion of assets at the Tresses hedge fund. So I asked him, are international investors worried about the situation?
Most international investors are obviously showing one very clear signal of lack of confidence in this system being perpetuated forever, is that they are getting out of sovereign bonds. That's why the central bank has to purchase 100% of the net issuances. So they don't buy the new sovereign bonds that are issued. And what they do is basically buy equities or buy risky assets that will reflect the inflationary pressures by getting higher multiples or higher valuations. No? So that is a signal in itself of lack of confidence. The fact that there is in reality no real secondary market demand for most of the European issuers that have negative yielding bonds. And you have seen it, for example, that even with the promise that the European Central Bank will purchase the entirety of a new issuance in the secondary market, bondholders are showing a much lower level of a bid to cover ratio, that is the number of times that an issuance has been oversubscribed, than in the past. And that shows basically that demand is coming down aggressively, even from those funds and pension funds that have to purchase sovereign bonds no matter what.
Would you agree that this is a really extreme form of central planning? It's really incredible. Am I mistaken?
Absolutely, it is. This is very aggressive central planning, and many of our viewers might think, what's bad about it? The central bank is allowing governments to borrow cheap. That means that public services are not under any risk, and that governments can borrow whatever they need. All is good. No, it looks acceptable, doesn't it? Until you realize that your savings and your wages are worth less and less and less, because that's the flip side. The flip side of it all is that pensioners find it more difficult to get to the end of the month, that real wages are weaker, that the savings of citizens are eroded almost on a daily basis. And also, an important flip side of it all as well is that by leading investors into financial repression, i.e. forcing them to take much higher risk than what they would want to in order to get a little bit of yield, they also accelerate the path to financial crisis. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's a very negative outcome every few years.
Daniel Kaye, Tresses. And still to come this evening. If you buy Amazon Basics products, you better listen up. The federal government is investigating some that users say caught on fire. And businesses are still struggling to find workers, but in Ocean City, New Jersey, one restaurant is getting some assistance from a robotic server. That and more after this short break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
Why are millions of Americans moving their money into gold and silver? It's simple. The world has never been more unpredictable. The biggest economic crisis we've faced since 2008, and a government that's about to print trillions and trillions of dollars. That's why so many Americans are turning to gold and silver to protect their nest egg. American Hartford Gold is a trusted name to help families to safeguard their wealth. With an A+ rating from the BBB and 5-star ratings on the biggest review websites like Trustpilot and Google, American Hartford Gold can help you convert any qualifying IRA or 401k into precious metals. or they'll help you to easily purchase physical gold and silver and deliver straight to your doorstep. Learn how you can protect your wealth with gold and silver today. Get this free 2021 information guide. Call 866-893-1493 or text TV to 65532.
Federal authorities are now investigating Amazon electronics. Some of the products reportedly burst into flames. The Consumer Product Safety Commission is looking into at least 8 products sold under the Amazon Basics brand. Electronics include battery chargers, surge protectors, and a voice-activated microwave that consumers said caught fire. Other buyers reported products that melted or exploded. Amazon declined to comment on the investigation, but it said it evaluates every report of safety issues and takes the appropriate action. And listen up, adventure seekers, Airstream is unveiling a new RV that can take you off-roading. It's called the Interstate 24X four-wheel drive camper van. Not only does it have tires that can handle the wilderness, but it has other features like a light bar above the windshield and solar panels. For comfort, you can sleep 2 to 4 people and seat as many as 6. The bathroom even has a heated floor, the kitchen has a cooktop and a microwave oven. Airstream says the starting price is about $214,000. The pandemic has caused RV sales to skyrocket. Parent company Thor Industries said it has more than $14 billion of backlogged orders. And in Ocean City, New Jersey, one restaurant owner is testing out a new way to combat the labor shortage. He says it's been so hard to find workers that they've had to lease a robot to help run food orders to the tables. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
This is Peanut, the robot restaurant worker. This robot, food runner, and busboy is leased from Rich Tech Robotics for about $2,000 a month and has been put to work at Island Grill Seafood and Steakhouse.
They've based their numbers on if you were paying a busser for a 40-hour week for a month for 3 shifts. It has a 14-hour battery, takes about 11 hours to recharge overnight. We've never had an issue with it even getting to 50%.
The robot takes the place of 4 human employees, but never needs a break or a cut of the day's tips. More than a year after the pandemic brought economic hardship and job losses to the restaurant industry, many companies are struggling to fill positions and stock enough supplies to meet customer demand.
So this year we had a big challenge ahead of us is getting back our staff. Back in 2019, we had a staff of around 87 employees. Last year with COVID, we're just doing inside dining, we had a staff of 21. So for this year to be able to open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we needed to get back a staff of 80.
Chef Yoa saw discussion about the robot online. He says he rented Peanut partly out of desperation to make back the money he lost last year. The robot is connected to the restaurant's Wi-Fi and navigates using sensors attached to the ceiling throughout the building. Yoa says Peanut provides an extra set of hands, letting the human servers stay out of the kitchen and interact with customers.
It's a little different. I'm kind of concerned a little bit about jobs, but the way that the world's gone with automation, just the way it is, it seems convenient. It seems like it would be good for the restaurant and its overhead and things of that nature down the road, but it's just odd to see a robot serving you food.
Yoa says if he can find enough human staff to work at the restaurant, he will probably have to fire Peanut. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
That's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.